This is the Messiah Hour with Ari Lewis.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Messiah Hour here on Israel Sports and News Radio. Thank you for joining us. At any time, you can email the program, messiahhour@gmail.com, or you can email the station, Israel Sports News Radio @gmail.com. We have a special show today. We're going to promote a new book, but before we do that, I just want to give a quick shout-out to two of our sponsors from last week, Valerie and Eric Doe. Thank you for your support. Appreciate it. And anyone else who would like to contribute and sponsor a program, you can go to the Donate tab on the right side of the website, click on that, and go from there. On the line right now to promote his new book, our favorite rabbi from Tzfat, back to the program, Rabbi David Katz. Rabbi, how you doing out there?
Hey, Ari, thanks for having me back as always.
Yes, indeed. So, before we talk about a bit about the new book, let's talk a little bit about how you got started with No Hides and Ger. That's your main work. It's what you're known for. So how did you get started?
The story has been told a couple of different times in different venues, long and short, but on one foot, not to bore the listeners. And for those that have already heard the story, here's the quick version, I guess. It started back in, I don't know, my whole life. I always do this every time. Where I started, but there's always a story in the story. To make that part short, I grew up very traditional / secular in Dayton, Ohio, transplanted from Pittsburgh, PA. And as I found out as an adult, my entire childhood was surrounded by what I now call Ger, which is the non-Jews that were not trying to take me to church, right? And I didn't know that as a kid. My youth was dominated by these non-Jews, but none of them ever seemed to believe in Yeshu, and I never heard of anyone going to church. So I just kind of thought I wasn't in a very religious neighborhood. But it turns out the Jewish kid, nobody actually tries to take him to church. The Jewish kid is surrounded by, again, what I call today Ger. And how do I know that? Because at the the Ger conference in Waco and Houston and Abilene, Lubbock that I did last summer, at one of the stops at the Shabbat at Anita Jones's house, the widow of Wendell Jones, a good friend of mine, one of my best friends from high school, came to that Shabbaton. So, and he didn't come for me so much. He really came to experience Ger and be around Ger. That really proved to me that my childhood was what I thought it was when I got older, and it was a Ger experience. And the more on Facebook I connect to these guys from back in the day, one guy I joke around and say, he contacted me. He says, "Dude, I watch your shows on YouTube, man. I'm a Ger." So it's like, so I can see now that my youth made sense. With that said, when I got to yeshiva, my Rosh Yeshiva was a student or Talmud of the school from Rav Hutner and Rav Freifeld. Kind of the lineage that came out of Chaim Berlin Yeshiva. And Rav Hutner, as it turns out, was a great friend of the Lubavitcher Rebbe. And everyone knows the Lubavitcher Rebbe's work with the Noahites. That's why I always oscillate Ger and Noahide, because and in vernacular it works out to be about the same. I know I make a stink in my teachings about it, but in spoken vernacular we actually call it the Noahide Ger in our book, The World of the Ger. But it turns out that Rav Hutner was quite possibly the lumdis, the learning behind the Lubavitcher Rebbe when it came to Noahide or Noahism, whatever it is, because he writes extensively about it in his Pachad Yitzchak work, whereas the Rebbe pushed the Noahide movement, and the Sikhs have the lumdis in it, but Rav Hutner, I think, showed a little bit more creativity in the development of the Machshava. And it makes sense because they were very close friends. It's not like it's a contest. And I remember being a bacher in yeshiva, and I found a Hanukah book translated into English from the teachings of Rav Hutner. And couple that with my secular past, growing up in Dayton, Ohio, and I read it. And I got it because my Rosh Yeshiva was a student there, and I thought, wow, okay, this is my lineage, in learning. I should do it. And I loved Rav Hutner. I saw it and I thought, wow, this is really makes sense. Now I understand why I'm in this yeshiva. I was in that yeshiva for over a decade. And in the book, it's his, I forget the name of the book in English. It says Pachad Yitzchak on Hanukah in Hebrew. And it talks about how the Noahide laws work with a lot of things in terms of Jewish philosophy, not to get into it now. So I must have read that book in 2005, maybe 2004, and it just had a profound impact. So by the time I was a rabbi and got smicha, I was a novice, but I was very comfortable weighing in Noah. I kind of like to use the term Noahism when it comes to this. I was not afraid to bring Noahism into my hashkafa, my Jewish view, especially with the Hanukah story and translating the Torah into Greek. Just the non-Jew kind of always had a certain flavor, aside from the fact that I've had very special friends, especially in my early tshuva years, that were not Jewish and that were instrumental, and also looking back, and I'm still in touch with them, and they are/were ger. Now, fast forward just one more stage into the future, how I got involved. Once I moved on out of the yeshiva kollel and into the kind of working world, for various reasons. My family went through a bit of transition, for those that know my personal story. And a guy, a local in Sfat, who was again, what was he then now? But he's a ger. He passed on now, but he was a ger. And that came out later on as well. And he told me, your stuff would be great for these Noahides. And I thought there was like maybe 4 or 5 Noahides in the entire world, like every other Jew. I didn't think it was a big deal. Well, long story short, from then on, I found an organization online, and we agreed to do a little. I would work for them because I've been a big fan of Shem, as in Shem, son of Noah, and that was what Ron, my ger friend, thought would be a good thing for the Noahide. And over the years, I've put together a lot of what I called at the time Tour of Shem ideas. And everyone's, is that kosher? What is that? Tour of Shem. Okay, so, Ari Lewis, I'm now the interviewer. I'm going to ask you a question. Ready?
Okay, sure.
Every year in Parshas told us, don't you remember learning about Jacob learned in the tents, whatever those tents were? Remember that?
Oh, Shem and Eber, yeah.
What can you remember anything you can recall from those times every year you hear that? Just anything off the top of your head?
That he learned with them, I believe, 16 years?
Right, and then you probably ask a question or two, like everybody else, like, hey, that's interesting. What is that, right?
Well, what did he learn?
And what's the answer you got?
Well, I guess it varies based on who you talk to.
So what are some of the answers you've received? In general, paraphrased.
I guess general Torah, Shwapeh, general halakha stuff.
Right, very kind of right?
Yeah.
Nothing so great. Just, they learned what they learned. Yeah, move on, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
Accurate? Right. So I remember being in yeshiva, and they mocked it, just, So when I got to yeshiva, I was told about Shem Malki Tzedek, right? Malki Tzedek is Shem. Everyone knows that. It's a famous teaching in the yeshiva world. And over the years, I just saw many, many great teachings about Shem, right? When the first one was in Sukkah 52b, the only place in the entire Talmud that talks about Mashiach ben Yosef, one of the 4 craftsmen there, Mashiach ben Yosef, Mashiach ben David, Eliyahu, and the Kohen Tzedek. Who's the Kohen Tzedek? The righteous priest. Look in Rashi. It's Shem, son of Noah. I remember asking everyone in Nicola and Yeshiva, hey, why is this non-Jew part of our Messianic tradition? And no one knew the answer. I called Rav Ginsburg of Chabad, the one that first brought it to my attention in one of his books. He said, read in Malachi about the lips of the priest will safeguard knowledge. And that, I didn't really understand it back then. But, okay, it kind of made sense and na. After 10 years, I had a nice stockpile of Shem. And again, for those that know my personal story, my apartment that I'm soon to be vacating for the city of Modin, just a little plug there for my new branding identity. The Kohen returns to the place of the Chashmonayim, for those interested. I live outside right now, the Cave of Shem and Aver in Sfat. So there was a special kind of thing. In Sfat, when you hear about Shem and Aver, we actually have the cave out there. And my apartment building is on the grounds of it right now. And I used to daven in that synagogue on Shabbos and in the Kiddush and things like that. So I just had a special eye for looking for Shem. And it's everywhere. It's in the Talmud. It's classic sources. It's not like Apikoros, weird heretical books. We're talking like, Masechta Yoma, right? It's in Masechta Sukkah. It's classic sources, right? The whole thing about Jacob learning with Shem and Aver in the beginning of Vayetze, right? Jacob was buried in the base midrash of Shem and Aver, and it was 14 years, Ari Lewis. 14 years.
Not 16, 14. Okay.
14. What can you do? So, with that said, by the time I was ready to teach these so-called Noahides, I thought, there's a billion Noahide rabbis on the planet. I really don't need to be one more teaching 7 laws of Noah. Jews don't want to hear about Shem, as we know, right, from our yeshiva experiences. I thought, why don't I teach what I call the Tour of Shem, just these little nuggets spread out through the Midrash and Talmud about Shem. I remember one of the first nuggets I found was, Ari, you'll like this, you ready?
Yep, go ahead.
I'll even give a little bit of a yeshivish twang for you, right? Why do we have white tzitzis, Ari Lewis, and why do we have Techelis, blue tzitzis? So the blue tzitzis is in the merit of Avraham with his Yirah Shemayim. And the white tzitzis is in the merit of Shem as he pulled the beged, the garment over his naked father. Did you know that?
I did not.
Most people didn't. So there's a lot of these little nuggets everywhere. And Shem pops up where you never thought he'd pop up. So I made note of it. I called this organization, and we got in touch, and I started to work for them. I'm in Sfat, and these people are in Texas. So I wrote an article once a week on the Parsha, and I taught a live class, which ended up being 34 classes Tour of Shem. And that people started asking questions, and I give the way the story goes, can we keep Shabbos? Not going to keep Shabbos is Chayiv Misa. Okay, we all know that. But I remember saying, I never saw it written. I'm not sure. I mean, let me at least be intellectually honest and look it up. I know the party line like everybody else, but let's look it up. So I went and looked it up, and there's this thing called ger that seems to be contradictory to the party line. Long story short, that was where the work began. Ever since that day, I'm proving ger to this day, right? Because the party line is so strong. And ironically, the least of my worries is the Tour of Shem. Nobody, the most controversial thing that I do, nobody has any problems with, and that's this branding of sorts of the Tour of Shem. It just sounds kind of not so Jewish, and he's not Jewish, so to speak. And when I got this job, if you can call it a job, it's just kind of like I needed a place to plug my Torah into. I bought Otzer Chachma, which is a hard disk of 50,000 books. And I thought, you know what? I think I have a lot of stuff on Shem. But in case I don't, let me do a search on the hard disk. And I did. And it came up with 2,000 hits of Shem. So I thought I at least have 2,000 classes worth of material, right? So it's the least of my worries. And to this day, it is the least of my worries. Of all the things that I'm running around trying to prove about ger, not one person gives me grief about the Tour of Shem. Go figure. And with that, we were left with a fascinating idea in Shem. The ger work, as I'm saying, that became the controversial work, and in all honesty, it's the least controversial thing I do. It's the most precedented thing there is that I do. Not that the others lack precedent. It's just that ger is such an obvious thing in the sources for anyone that actually has the power to lift up the cover of a book and open and read. Whereas Shem really requires some research. Anyways, with that said, at the end of all of where I'm at now with ger and all these things, finally I met someone that was willing to edit the articles. That I had many articles left, just a pile of 3 years worth of articles. And that's really where it began. The Shem work I'm just now getting back into. The articles were there. Ger work is in the making, and I never really did enter the Noahide world. It's always been this kind of next step, Tour of Shem and Ger and all these things, and Mazal. And so that's really where my beginnings began, from the very beginning until where we stand today.
Again, this is the Messiah Hour here on Israel Sports and News Radio, joined by Rabbi Katz talking about his new book. Let's talk a little bit about the Tour of Shem. Tell us a bit about that.
So the Tour of Shem, I want to know how you feel, Ari. I want to know, how did you, because again, you're a classic guy, right? You're in a class in every year in Parshas Toldus, right?
Yeah, I tried to, yeah.
So how do you feel when you every year are confronted with that whole thing with Jacob and Shem? Honestly, what goes through your mind when you hear every year Yaakov and Shem?
Oh, it sounds like there's a lot of mystery, a lot more that we need to learn about what happened.
Right. And then the parsha goes on, and that's about the end of it, isn't it?
Yeah, pretty much.
It's weird. That's it. So, I got stuck there. I never wanted to get out of there. The Tour of Shem, once you just stop at Vayetze, right? Jacob leaves Isaac and Rebekah, and he's looking for his eventual wife Rachel, right? And you read the Tourm and how the commentary, how he went to Beersheba and he was in the Beis Midrash of Shem and Aver for 14 years. Some say he served Shem, I think it was for 50 years, right? All these exotic midrashim with Jacob and Shem. And when you dig a little deeper, you start, like I said, about the white tzitzis, blue tzitzis. Then you get into Malki Tzedek and blessing Abraham, and you start to realize that the Kabbalistic sources say that Shem did not mess up the blessing, as some say he did. Right? And those that say he did are the same people that say Ger's convert. It never actually does say he messed up. It's an art scroll wonder, in all honesty, on that one. And the reason why they say, not that he messed up, again, I just said he didn't, but that it's a little funny, is because Shem was accomplishing giving the priesthood to Abraham, as Abraham was going to be the progenitor of progeny. And when you start to look at Shem in that way, right, he's not just Noah's kid that messed up. And you start to look at that Sukkah 52b, the righteous priest who has a function in redemption. The Ramchal says that it's Shem. That is the wisdom of Shem. Shem is the embodiment of wisdom, is the anointment of Mashiach. What you can say, it's like an Ibor Neshama that creates the Chachma, the wisdom and arousal in Mashiach. I mean, very, very deep Kabbalistic matters by kosher Kabbalah sources. Then, when you start to really look in the commentaries, which is what the articles were about, and you say, Arya, have you ever heard that Joseph was called Ben Zekunim?
Yeah, I've heard of that, yeah.
Yeah, usually it's translated as a son of, or a child of the elders, right?
Right.
So there's a very, I don't know if you ever heard this, have you ever heard of, what does Zekunim stand for? You ever hear about that?
I think so. I think I did, yeah.
Zrayim, right?
Okay, right.
Kodshim, Nashim, Yeshuas, and Moyed. 5 out of the 6 tractates of the Oral Torah. You follow that?
Okay. I haven't heard some of that stuff, but okay.
Right. There's 6 orders of the Mishnah, and those are 5 of them. Whereas the 6th one, Ari,
I don't know.
He was a bacher. He doesn't learn about Tumah Tahara. It's Taharas, matters we don't talk about on the air. So that's what they talk about in yeshiva, right? Ben Zekunim stands for the 6 orders of the Mishnah. What they don't tell you, is who taught him all this? Who taught Yosef? When you look in the commentaries, again, you'll find out Yosef learned in the Academy of Shem in Aver. Then there's the idea of where did Esav learn Torah? So when you look in Vayetze, I think it's like he went out from Beersheba with the letters. If I forget how it works out exactly, but it spells like Aver, it spells Shem, and then it spells something like Aviv or something for his father. I forget the exact thing. You can look in the Marsha commentary at the beginning of Vayetze, which Talmud uses it. I'm not sure which tractate it is, but it's the Marsha vis-a-vis that. And it's that Yitzchak had a yeshiva, and that Yitzchak as a child went to the academies of Shem and Aver. And Abraham was in Shem and Aver. And Job was in Shem and Aver. And you start to realize Judah was in Shem and Aver. Benjamin was in Shem and Aver. And it comes out, the entire book of Genesis, Shem receiving from Noah, from Enoch or Hanukah, who became Metatron, and back to Adam. It was all this tradition of ancient wisdom given to Adam from the angel Raziel, which is the same letter as Arizal, for those wondering. Just Kaballah stuff, And Shem's Torah wisdom just extends all the way through Genesis. And then there's a midrash that Shem went out. He didn't die. He actually went to the tree, to Gan Eden, and ate of the tree of life. And in the Torah, you can look it up on your own time, Ari. The offspring of Shem, in the end of Parshas Noach, no one says of them that they died, because it says that the Mashiach will eventually come from Semitic, and it comes from the spiritual influence of Shem. And Mashiach wipes away death forever because it started with Shem. And these are all like kosher sources. These are midrashim in a sefer called Rav Poralim, which is a collection of the midrashim used by the Vilna Gaon. And Moses, says the Arizal, was a Gilgal, reincarnation of Shem. So now you have the whole. Have you ever heard in the Torah when God says to Moshe, "I've known you by name"?
Yes, I remember that pasuk.
Right.
Yep.
Right. So what is it? If I have found grace in your eyes, and I think Hashem says you have found grace in my eyes, and I've known you by name. Right.
Right.
So the Arizal says grace is the same letter as Noah, and Shem is Shem. And it's not a contradiction that Shem and Noah would have the same type of soul at the same time, for whatever reason explained in Shar Gogolim. And those are all aspects of Moses. So the entire Torah then becomes kind of on that level. And the Vilna Gaon says that the secret dimension, or the inner dimension of the Torah is the Tour of Shem. I actually have a graphic of that from the book that I'm translating, Midrash Shlomo, which is Vilna Gaon Zionism, another book. On my Facebook images. I post my images there for people to see. Bottom line, Tour of Shem is all these little nuggets that we find in the Midrash, in the Talmud, all these things. But what is it really? It's the neshama to the Torah, right? It's the level when the Torah becomes prophetic and not just like a pill pull and halacha. Because remember, we say it's Moshe Rabbeinu wrote the Torah, but that's not exactly true. It's more true. Are you like this? Ready?
Yep.
It's more true to say Moshe Navi Enu wrote the Torah. I mean, is it not? We say Moses is the prophet of prophets, correct?
Correct, yep.
And the Torah is the highest prophecy that exists ever. So technically, the words of Torah are prophetic. Thus, when you understand the prophetic word, that's the Torah of Shem element. It's the Torah of Moshe understood on a higher level. That's really what Torah of Shem is about. That's what the articles are about. And that those ideas, those articles were redacted and put into, finally, after at least about 5 years, a book. That's what's coming out.
All right, again, this is the Messiah Hour on Israel Sports and News Radio. Thank you for joining us. And again, my guest is Rabbi David Katz. Let's talk about, in the past, you were a writer of articles. You wrote an article every week. Tell us a bit about that.
So the articles were really the engine where it started. I really didn't care about, what do you call it, just grammar, really anything. That's why it was either a love-hate relationship. Either loved the articles or you hated them. They were bad in terms of readability or legibility. But if you wanted an experience to grab a concept and meditate on it, because I remember I was in yeshiva for a decade, and you know how it is, Ari. Torah is not written like English, right? It's a different head altogether.
Absolutely.
And a lot of the English words that we use don't exist in when you go in down to Hebrew. So I'll give you an example. Ready? Ari hu Adam gadol hu. Can you translate that?
No.
But you know what it means.
Not really, no.
Ari hu Adam hagadol hu.
Oh, Ari is a big person, a great person.
But if you were to translate that in English, you may miss out a few key like its or thes. You know what I mean? It's
sure.
not. It's like you say Ari Adam hu, like Ari man is,
yeah.
right? So when you want to make it into flowery English, how do you do that? But without butchering it, right? If I say Ari Adam hu, Ari man, but if I want to make it English. Hey, everybody, my great friend Ari Lewis is a tremendous individual and very nice guy. He helps old ladies cross the street, everybody. Ari Adam Gadolhu. So when I'm trying to capture the idea and you meditate on Hebrew, you're not thinking about making it understood in English. You want to capture the moment, right? If I have a big revelation about Ari Adam Gadolhu, then it's got to come out that way. So I write down, Ari the man is... and it doesn't work so good in English. So if you wanted to get into it on a meditative level, Torah level, that's when and this was back when things were raw, years ago already. It's much more evolved today. This was like the beginnings of Ger. And it was awesome. It was raw, it was fresh, it was exciting. And for me, it was just encapsulating these ideas of researching every parsha, brand new, looking for Ger, Universal, Noahide, Shem, Torah every week, right? So let's go to Parshas Pekudei. All right, have you ever learned Parshas Pekudei?
Yeah, not in a while, but yes.
Right, and you're probably going to find the same old stuff every year. I'm just picking one randomly, right? How many times do you think the Tour of Shem appears in Pekudei?
I'm not sure. Tell me.
Probably not a lot. But the goal was to find Shem and Ger, Noahide in every parsha. And we did. And it took a lot of thought. Now, the Jewish people, as I'm kind of jabbing at you, just don't think this way. Right? We ever hear the same thing. Rashi said, Ramban said, move on. We're not interested in the whole panorama view. So at the end of a couple cycles, we had all these articles written from angles and concepts taken from the Chumash that really, I don't know the last time they were taught. And what we effectively did was we saw Shem / Ger in every parsha. And at the end of it, we had great material. And it produced the world of the Ger. And in its very refined format. And the world of the Ger is great. And it's a fantastic book to get on the Ger path. But in the back of my mind, I'm saying there's a, like in Israel, there's like shale oil, if we could just, cultivate the oil from this. So there was a lot of worth in my articles, like natural resources embedded in the earth. And if I could just find a way to extract it, I knew it was going to be a great book. And it took a while. And that's what we had to work with these articles. And they were just stacked up, literally just piling dust. I mean, cyber dust because they were on the computer. Also, I printed in my apartment. But the point is that they hadn't been touched in so long. And finally, I met Miriam Ben Yaakov, who was able to cipher the code of what we were doing back then, and really unlock the door to these things, and do the little adjustments with a literary twang to make my caveman grunts of Torah into a legible English. And thank God she was able to do that.
All right, so tell us a bit about some of the goals of the new book coming out. What do you hope to accomplish?
I hope to make about $25 million in the first week alone, and be a rival to the Star Wars Force Awakens for a social media presence in the world, promoting the Tour of Shem and Ger. How about you, Ari?
That's a pretty lofty goal, but outside of money, what do you want to try to achieve?
The money really is not a part of it. The goal is that the world of the Ger is told over. My co-author Chaim Korfin, he did a wonderful job in really listening to these ideas that are in the book coming out, and he told the story in his own way. And the book had a different purpose, a different function, and I'm totally with the world of the Ger. It just wasn't a strictly David Katz work. Everyone that knows me knows I have a very consistent style of maybe it's a bad style, but I'm consistent with it. It's not hard to follow. It's just a quirky kind of style. And what it is, and I told you, I remember before we started the air tonight, I gave this analogy, bringing up Star Wars for a reason. Everybody knows there's Star Wars, to give an analogy. And it's great. We got this character, that character, and Disney's talking about doing like a Han Solo Chronicles, right? I think Harry Potter's doing the same thing with one of his characters. So if World of the Ger has Job and Jethro and Solomon and Shem and Abraham and all these characters, my book, Soul Mazal, it's called Soul Mazal. I went with my own branding of what I've been using, Soul Mazal, for a while now. And it's called the what do you call it? Timeless Torah for the Soul. Sorry about that. And what it does is it goes into the lives of these Ger chronicles, right? When Moses called his son Gershom, which means I was a Ger there. And in the world of the Ger, that's not, I think it actually is mentioned a little bit about Moses and his Ger relationships. So where I took the articles, which became a Parsha Devar Torah, it goes into who was Moshe the Ger before Mount Sinai? Job, a famous Ger. Who was Job? What was the Ger life of him? What was the Tour of Shem life of him? Who were the tribes of Israel? I mean, Ari, here's another thing I'll challenge you on. You have no idea who the tribes of Israel are because you're Jewish. We go to yeshiva, we never hear about them. Is that right? I mean, barely.
Yeah, not so much.
No one's like, hey, Ari, are you a big fan of Asher or God?
Right, it's not really discussed in detail.
Right, not at all. It doesn't even exist. So these articles are looking at it like, yeah, let's look at it. What is out there? And when one of the Tour of Shem principles that we stand by, me and Chaim, and particularly in writing this book, is the Tour of Shem, as we've come to understand it, serves to shed light on matters of Torah that are not looked at, perverted, like Art Scroll Convert Ger, or deliberately distorted under your nose and you didn't realize it. All right, I'm going to ask you another question. Ready?
Sure.
Tell me about your good friend Terach, the father of Abraham.
He worshipped a lot of idols. He owned an idol worshiping shop or idol shop.
So, and when you look at it with a Tour of Shem filter, you know who one of the greatest Gerim of all time was?
Was it him?
It was him.
Wow.
That's anyone pre-Abraham is a Rasha Gomor in Yiddishkeit circles. When you get into a Ger outlook, you find out that the Jewish way of studying it is an over accentuation on one point. I'm not blaming anybody. All right, just like Shem butchered the blessing to Abraham. Yeah, I mean it came out wrong, but we don't look at the rest of the story. Not because we're distorting it. Anyone's free to go learn it. but people have free will. I mean, Ari, why didn't you go and study the Tour of Shem? You learned it. Parshas told us. Well, you should have gone to learn it. Why didn't you? You just didn't.
Right, just didn't. Yeah.
What do you want from me? I learned Parshas told us, and I moved on like everybody else. But there's another world of Torah for those that don't move on, right? When you got done with Parshas Noach, and you left Terach behind, Ari, there are those out there that tarried on with him. You see? And there's another story to basically everything in the Torah. How about this? How about your good friend Jethro? He converted, right?
As far as we know, yeah.
No, he didn't.
Okay.
100% he didn't. But we see in the art scroll it says Lehid Gayer, he became Ger, and in art scroll it became convert. No, it means he became Ger. And nowhere in Chazal does it say that he became a convert to Judaism. Nowhere. But why don't we blame everybody? Because what am I supposed to spend my whole life wondering what happened to Jethro? So Ger becomes a point of view. It becomes a place of looking at the Torah through the Tour of Shem. And it's just a derech of learning. No one's wrong for saying these things. I mean, when you get into Torah, Ari, have you ever learned Hilchos Shabbos?
Sure. Yeah.
Why didn't you become an expert rabbi and learn it more?
It's a lack of time, I suppose.
So you don't care about Shabbos?
No, that's not true.
Right. See, this is the thing. We don't have time to sit and master everything. I would love to be a master of the Talmud. You could blame me. Why don't I know Talmud? It's not my thing, right? The Litfox, they learn Talmud, all the time. You can blame anybody from anything if you want to be that kind of person. At the end of the day, we try our best and we try to learn as much as we can, right? I mean, this is a famous question in yeshiva. Ari, if you remember this, when you're in a yeshiva, tell me if you've ever had this happen to you. You've learned something, let's say, really great, and you heard somebody learning near you that didn't know as good as you, and you knew the answer. Has that ever happened to you?
Yeah, that's happened before.
And do you butt in and be like, hey, you didn't learn it like me? No. You let them stumble through it, and it's just the way it is. So there's something called the non-Jew in Torah, and the Jewish people just don't find it that interesting. They just don't, and I don't blame them. When you go back and look at the non-Jew in Torah, you begin to realize that Chazal had a 3D view of those people that we just didn't look at. And there's a select few of rabbis in history that delivered tremendous universal view of the Torah, Kavod Abrius, that we don't even know. The Lubavitcher Rebbe got Ger more than 99% of all rabbis that lived. Did you know that, Ari?
Well, I know you've said that before, so that's how I know.
And Rebbe Nachman got Ger. Rav Hutner got Ger in the writings. Chafetz Chaim got Ger. Did Moshe Streimel get Ger? Not necessarily. But there are some that did. And the ones that did, they understood really the Almost Olam, the Chassidi Almost Olam, the Ger, the whatever you want to call it. And it's a flavor of Torah. It's not everyone's flavor. But it's there. And it exists. And because it's not 1A on most people's radar, we begin to get party lines about people. Yes, Terach had idolatry. Okay, we all learned that. But when we moved on to the next Parsha, you didn't go look at the Rishonim or whatever that explained what Terach was when he rejected the idolatry by taking Abraham's advice, so to speak, right? And we say, are you? Here's a little trivia question for you. Are you aware of the Midrash that says anyone whose name's repeated, like Avram gets Olam Haba?
Yeah, gets Olam Haba, right. Terach gets Olam Haba, yeah.
Why didn't you mention that?
I just didn't.
That's it. Just didn't. That's it. And you don't see that you knew it, and you know it, but it just didn't connect, right? And so the Tour of Shem is what connects those dots for people, right? Yeah, he was a Baal Tshuva, he was in idolatry, but he did get Olam Haba, right? Eliezer was like the slave of Abraham, also got Olam Haba, was like super duper ger, right? Job was some kind of goy, no, also an amazing character. And at the end of the day, you have a whole other 50% of the Torah of amazing characters and things and non-Jews that celebrate the Shabbat but don't keep the Shabbat. Who's ever heard of such a thing? A goy that keeps Shabbos is Chayav Misa. So the Jewish people have a light to nations, but not everybody says, my name is Moshe Streimel and my job 1A is to be a light to nations. It's just not common, and that's okay. But for those in history that decided to do it, there's a wonderful Torah out there which we kind of make harmonious with Tour of Shem concepts and ideals, and that's what the articles are about. It's about really redeeming those midrashim and elements and just making them matter again because they're interesting and it really corrects the worldview we have. For example, ger is not always convert. So imagine all those little corrections, not correcting it, it's just bringing to attention the dots. Hey, Ari, remember the terach, and it matters because of XYZ, and it's going to make a great book, right? It just really brings to our attention who were the tribes, right? What was Abraham as a ger before Sinai? You know that Abraham wasn't Jewish. Am I wrong?
Well, there's different arguments about it.
It was before Sinai.
Right, but he kept it, so the Avot kept the Torah.
So did the Gerim.
Hmm.
So before Sinai, it's not mitzvah v'oseh, not commanded and does. Every Talmudic Chazal Rishon says that. Nobody says counter that. Right? So these things come to the surface. It begins to just it begs the question, like you said, what was the reality pre-Sinai? And the funny thing is, there is kosher literature saying what it is. It's just not learned. It's not popular. It's not in style, right? Judaism learning has style, and what the ger really does, it's like an alternative style. It's not alternative Torah because it takes from the same Talmud, the same midrashim, and we're not talking about taking minority opinions either. We're talking about halacha majority view. It's just that not everything's in style. When's the last time you learned Yavamas?
It's been a while.
So that's the thing. When I was in yeshiva, my Rosh Yeshiva used to say, every yeshiva deals like Bava kamma, right? Bava mitzia, brachas. There's a standard regimen of the tractates that yeshivas learn. No yeshiva is going to learn Yavamas. None. But where's the most ger Torah? Yavamas, Nazir, Nadarim, right? The things that just are not in style. There's no style. But the ger world gives you a template to put it into practice, then it becomes in style. So it's a totally different view. I mean, when's the last time the Red Heifer became something of mattering to you, Ari?
Just basically once a year during the Parsha.
That's it. But if you probably never noticed, in the psukim, the verses of the Red Heifer, the ger is commanded. The non-Jewish ger is commanded to take part of the Red Heifer.
Okay.
So there's tons of these things. Tons and tons and tons and tons of these things. It's like 50% of the Torah. My job was to bring those aspects out and put them in one conglomerate whole and teach on it, and that's what the book's about. It's wild. I know it's a wild thing.
All right. Last question before we let you go. You talk about Terach and Olam Haba. How could that be possible if he is such a major idol worshiper? He was a guy that owned an idol shop. He was a big part of it. So how could he go to Olam Haba when that's the cardinal sin in Judaism?
He did tshuva. You've heard the theme of the Roman whatever, right? Who, I forget the exact story, but 1 second or minute before he died, he did tshuva, and they said he's a ben Olam Haba. Right? So he did tshuva. Abraham was successful in bringing him to tshuva. And there's precedent. The ger gets Olam Haba. The Rambam says explicitly, the people who are from the Hasidic Omos Olam have Olam Haba. Right? The non-Jew gets Olam Haba. The Ramchal says it very clearly. The nations of the world get Olam Haba. Then they'll say, but it's not the same level as a Jew. That's because it's talking about the Omos Olam. However much a person wants to repent. Now remember, we don't know which level Olam Haba he got. So there's probably the answer. But for as much as it's worth, he got Olam Haba. You know, and only Hashem knows what that means for him. The point is, when we do tshuva, and to whatever extent I think the benchmark really is how much you love Israel. And Abraham became the progenitor of Israel. Terach, we have to say, at the end of his life, became attached to that. That's the story. That's the story. He became attached to Abraham and received Olam Haba.
All right, good stuff. Again, this is the Messiah Hour on Israel Sports News Radio. My guest is Rabbi David Katz, talking about his new book. So people that want to get the new book, where should they go to?
It's going to be on Amazon. It will be on Kindle eventually. It's not up yet. We're hoping tomorrow, this week. It's nearly there, but within a week, feel free to go to Amazon, type in the search bar. Again, I don't know the exact search parameter, if it's Rabbi David Katz or David Katz, Soul Mazal, any of these search fields. Timeless Torah for the soul. But check with the social media. Ariel, I'm sure, will be promoting the link in the future. Just look for the social media outburst on it. It's going to be there. The links will be provided, but generally Amazon.com. It'll be available for purchase.
All right, there you go. So everyone can go to Amazon and purchase the book. And again, this is another episode of the Messiah Hour at Israel Sports News Radio. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Rabbi, thank you for being on the program. Great job, as always.
Thanks for being back, Ari, and thanks for being a trooper for the Yeshiva's grilling today.
Yes, no problem. And everyone out there, I hope you enjoyed the program. If you like what you heard and want to give a donation, you can do so on the donate tab on the right side of the website, Israel Sports and News Radio. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Be well, God bless, and shalom from Israel.